Hi everybody, Ollie here and welcome back to another end of the week wrap-up video. There's quite a lot to cover, it's been a busy week, so we'll jump right in. On Monday, we started looking at sepsis, the kind of how sepsis is defined, what differentiates it from just a normal severe infection, and the kinds of pathways you would need to go through if you suspect someone might have severe sepsis. Because this is relevant as part of our heart, blood and lungs teaching, this was also combined with a first look at kind of general imaging of the chest, including looking at the lungs and how the lungs might look different if you're infected with something like pneumonia. I found this really interesting because there's a case, if someone needs treating extremely urgently, if they have severe sepsis and they're in septic shock, we were told it could be a case of hours. You know, you need to start treating them immediately, and in this case they use I think the term was empirical antibiotics, so without waiting for blood cultures to come back to the lab, so before you know what microbe it is that's causing the infection, it's a kind of best guess scenario of which antibiotic would be best. It seems to be a case of just taking the knowledge you have at that moment in time, using that to decide what antibiotic statistically might be best, and then throwing that in and hoping it works because you don't have time for the blood cultures to be done. CBL on the Monday afternoon was really heavy going, I think. We did a lot of the anatomy the week before, the kind of normal anatomy and physiology, but there was just so much content to get through in terms of the investigations and the test results that we really weren't sure of. So in this session I gave a very short presentation on arterial blood gases, or ABGs, as you might have heard them referred to as, and how to interpret the test results and what that means in terms of the body. So what's the importance of the pressure, partial pressure of carbon dioxide and oxygen within the body, as well as acid and base levels, and how do you distinguish between respiratory alkalosis or acidosis, where it's a problem with the lungs controlling levels of CO2 in the body, or a metabolic acidosis or alkalosis, which is when there's a problem with the kidneys controlling the levels of bicarbonate in the body. It was actually on Monday that I technically resigned as well from my editing role at the Boar, the newspaper, which I'm not going to talk about now because it really needs its own video to talk about the whole situation in general, but that happened on Monday. But by the time I actually got home on Monday night, I felt really poorly. I went to bed immediately on getting in, and I was just not a mess, but I was completely like weak and unable to do anything. I felt so tired, really groggy, and I think I woke up about 11 o'clock or something with one of the worst headaches I think I've ever had in my life. But I had like sort of flu symptoms as well, so headache, sort of frontal headache, and just congested and phlegmy and horrible. I woke up, I remember waking up, I think it had just gone 1 AM, this is Tuesday morning, and I did not get, like, by the time I got back to sleep again, it was light outside, and I think that indicates the length of time that I was kind of tossing and turning, unable to sleep. So safe to say, I did not make it into uni on Tuesday. It's the first time I've missed a day so far. I felt really bad about it. Thankfully, the 2 lectures in the morning that we were supposed to have had actually been cancelled, because the lecturer was unavailable, so those have been rescheduled to December. I missed the rest of them that day, but thankfully at Warwick all of the lectures are recorded through the Echo system, so I have since been able to catch up on them. So there was one on gender and ethnicity, I think it was called, with regards to clinical prevalence. There was one on another one on cardiorespiratory imaging. I think there was another pathology one of the airways, and then there was pharmacology of the airways as well. So actually on Wednesday morning it was a very packed day, even though I still felt really crap. I did make it into uni, so it was an 8 o'clock start for the Dean's breakfast. Now I think once a year, at least once a year, students are given the opportunity to come in and kind of talk to the admin staff directly about how the course is going and give any feedback and things like that, and they lay on the breakfast as well. things like fruit juice and croissants and muffins and things like that. And even though we were starting early, we got there at about 5 to 8, I think, in the morning. The car park on the medical school campus was completely full. It was absolutely rammed. So we actually had to go back to the main campus park, come all the way back, which took about 20 minutes, by which time virtually all the food had gone and the meeting had started. But it was really, really busy, so a lot of people clearly engaged with it. And people were, it was a bit of a kind of open forum, so anyone could voice any feedback or concerns or whatever they had, and then either the dean or another member of the admin staff team would address it directly, which I thought was really good. Obviously, just as a statistical point, addressing it in the meeting doesn't of course mean that they're going to do anything about it, but we've had emails since that meeting indicating that they have taken the feedback on board, and some of the things that were mentioned they've started working on as soon as a few days later. So I think that bodes really well. It did actually surprise me as well, the number of people that spoke up, that kind of directly to the dean, because he was in there leading the session. But I think that's partially maybe due to the age of our cohort. So I was just thinking back to undergrad, whenever we had feedback meetings like that, when everyone was between 18 and 21 or 22, everyone would just kind of keep their heads down and, not really want to cause a fuss and just want the meeting to be over with as soon as possible. But people were really engaging and being very, very kind of brutally honest in some examples. And I think that's definitely a difference that I noticed at this stage, because I think a lot of people, certainly more so than me, have made a concerted effort. Well, they've risked a lot more, I think, by coming back to medical school. They've either left a job they previously had or uprooted maybe partners, or do you know what I mean? I'm just trying to say they've had to give up a lot more than I necessarily have. I'm fresh out of my first degree. I have relatively very, very few responsibilities. That's not the same for everyone, and so people, I think, they expect things to be of a certain standard, and that's perfectly correct, I think, and they're much more willing to voice those opinions, and I think that's probably really good. So after that, we actually went out for brunch with our CBL group, and that was really, really nice. I've said before, I think I got really lucky with my CBL group. Obviously, I've not really met anyone else's group, or certainly I haven't seen how the other groups interact with one another, but I think ours is really harmonious. No one shouts over anyone. It's a really open environment, and the people are all lovely as well. So we went and found this other cheap venue on campus called Zananas, I think, like bananas but with an X at the beginning. I had salmon and scrambled eggs, which is my favourite breakfast, and it was really, really good and very cheap as well. So in the afternoon we actually concluded this respiratory CBL case, finally got through it. We ripped through all the remaining investigations and we closed up the case. We were given the patient's chest x-ray, which indicated that some fluid had kind of built up in one particular area of the lungs, which led us to diagnose it as pneumonia, which, given the other symptoms that the patient was showing, things like congestion and dizziness, there had to be an upper respiratory tract infection as well, which we thought was viral. And that was correct. It was community-acquired pneumonia secondary to an upper respiratory tract viral infection. And the patient actually was currently at the kind of beginning stages of sepsis and was at risk of proceeding further into septic shock. And that was interesting because that meant we had to consider the kind of first-line treatments. How do we deal with this immediately to stop it getting worse? But also, what consequences will that have for the patient, both in terms of like the next month and in the future as well? He'd probably have to be looked after in hospital for a little while, and the damage caused by this first infection would probably leave him at increased risk of getting further similar infections in the future. And that afternoon we had some optional spirometry labs, so that's all about testing lung function, and I was still extremely congested, so I didn't kind of I engaged with the tests, but I didn't do them myself. I was working with 2 other people who were the guinea pigs for that session, so it was nice to be out of that for a change. I say that actually, we were offered another slightly more advanced test at the end of the session, which we could all try. I did try, just because I thought I'd miss the opportunity if I didn't, and it turned out I was blowing, so it's kind of a forced exhalation against a spinning turbine valve thing, and I was blowing higher than my predicted output score based, it was predicted based on I think my age and BMI, and I was at something like 110, 115%, so that was quite a good sign, despite being completely full of cold. So again, on to Thursday, we started a new CBL case in the morning. CBL is so relentless. This time we were given an old lady. She had a productive cough, I think, but with clear mucus, so that makes it less likely that there's an infection. And whenever she breathed out, she had a whistling sound, like a high-pitched noise that appeared, which is clinically known as a wheeze. And this woman, she'd actually been given a blue inhaler, the salbutamol, a really common one. Most of you will have seen it, I'm sure. She'd been given this inhaler before. It hadn't really done anything, but she'd felt apparently in her consultation that the doctor hadn't really listened to her at all, hadn't explained why she had the inhaler, and she was actually so kind of annoyed by this that she hadn't come back to make a repeat appointment. And so naturally you might imagine there was a lot of sock pop, just a reminder that social and population perspectives, a lot of those types of issues to cover in this session. And it was a bit of a weird situation as well, because in CBL for each session we have kind of given learning objectives that we're supposed to hit, and we have a facilitator in the session that's supposed to keep us on track with addressing all of these points. And one of the points was the normal anatomy of the lungs, respiratory tract, which is perfectly reasonable. Obviously the normal anatomy and physiology is something that you would want to discuss. However, at this particular point we hadn't actually had any lectures on the structure of the lung yet, so we had no idea how to address it, and it seemed really odd that we'd been tasked with revising and kind of going over for ourselves the normal relevant anatomy, but before we'd actually had any teaching on it whatsoever, and we later learned that this, I think, was a timetabling issue. We then had a lecture on confidentiality as part of VLE. I think that comes under value law and ethics, and that was really, really interesting. It was all about the types of situation in which confidentiality becomes really important, and the situations in which it might be appropriate to break it if someone else is at risk. And it was all about, again, weighing up the benefit to the public of breaking confidentiality versus keeping it between yourself and the patient as part of that trust relationship. And it was actually really funny. I answered a question. It was something to do with autonomy in the lecture, and the lecturer, he was like, yeah, that's a good point. Love the blog, by the way. We all read it, or words to that effect, which was really, really funny. I do know that actually a lot of staff and students read it now. Awareness of it is really swept round, and I haven't really done the best I could to conceal its presence, but it's brought so many good opportunities as the blog, and people enjoy it. We were also given these to go and collect, actually, so I just keep this attached to my, like, is it a lanyard if you keep it attached to your waist? Like, I have this thing that clips to my belt loop, so it has all my ID cards and things on it. And we've had to pick up some encrypted memory sticks, so whenever we go on community placements, and I think my first one is actually this coming week, all the relevant data from that has to be kept on an encrypted flash drive. And I think after a certain number of attempts to put in the password, I think it's 6, if you don't get it right, it'll erase all the data on the drive. Because obviously confidentiality is really important, and you've got to keep people's information safe. And there was actually a big event on the Thursday night. It was Warwick Marrow presents Take Me Out. Now, Take Me Out, it's actually a show that I'd never seen before. I knew of its existence, the sort of dating show with Paddy McGuinness. It just, to be honest, sounded like garbage to me, so I've never put in the time to watch it. But basically, it was a recreation of that, done at the medical school with medical students to raise a bit of money for the Anthony Nolan Foundation, which I think matches stem cell donors or bone marrow donors, I can't remember which, to suitable patients. And in a classic weird little misadventure of mine, I ended up doing the photography for that night, because after the review, obviously a few people, I suppose, did know that I could do some vague attempt at photography, and my friend Kirsty from the year above, she actually, it turns out, had volunteered. She was supposed to be doing it. I should say volunteered me. She came over and found me on the Wednesday morning, and was sort of, are you free tomorrow night? I suppose. Okay, good, because I volunteered you to do this thing. So that's how I ended up doing that. It was actually loads of fun. It was really, really funny. Some of the girls were absolutely brutal with the guys, but they raised a lot of money as far as I'm aware, and it was for a really good cause. So the way it kind of works is that there were maybe 12, 15 girls kind of lined up at the front. It was all done in one of the lecture halls in the medical school, the kind of main big one. So all the girls are lined up at the front, kind of dressed up, and they'll be presented with one guy at a time. So a guy will come on, he'll sort of introduce himself, and in this case all the girls were holding balloons, and if at any point they decided they didn't sort of like him, they could pop one of the balloons, and that would indicate that they were out. And so the guy would introduce himself, he would present like a video showing kind of what he was like, he'd perform a skill or a talent, so a guy played the guitar or one guy played the piano, something like that, and then if there were any girls left with balloons, he'd have to pop balloons for them until only 2 girls were left. I think he'd then ask them both a question, and then based on the answer he'd pick one of them, and then they'd go on a date, and then the society would provide like vouchers so they could go and do that. Like I say, it was really, really funny. Everyone was really drunk, and it got kind of as hilariously off kilter as you'd expect it to get. But I do just want to say that I am not a good photographer or videographer, as you might have noticed by now. Most of the things that I do, I'm an okay editor, but in terms of the actual photography or shooting video, nothing that I do is that complicated. So I'm always a bit kind of nervous about agreeing to do things like this, but both the review, which I agreed to do on a complete whim, and this, they've been really, really good opportunities to get to know people and just have a lot of fun, really. And people enjoy the photos as well, so it's always nice, you know, other people are getting enjoyment out of it as well, and that makes it worth it. Friday we're in hospital again, so anatomy in the morning, as per, looking at the lungs, the trachea, breathing structures, that sort of thing. Had a really, really good seminar on the structure of the larynx, kind of running down here, and a lot of those structures, I have quite a pronounced kind of Adam's apple, they can see there, but you can palpate a lot of the relevant structures on me really, really easily. I'm delighted in getting people to like rest their finger on, and you can feel everything moving underneath. It's really gratifying to be able to sort of draw a diagram, like an anatomical diagram, and then like put your finger here and you'll feel this, or like I'll swallow and you should feel this, and then they feel it, and it really cements your own understanding in a weird way. In the afternoon we had a clinical skills session, but it was all about communication. So a patient would come in, you'd have to take a general history, like we're used to doing this by now, but there'd be another factor thrown in, like they might be in a rush or something like that. It was with a simulated patient, so an actor. And thankfully my feedback was really good. I was happy with what they said. They said I was sort of a calm, kind of reserved but confident speaker, and a bit chatty, which is good. I guess that's the kind of vibe I want to get across to a potential patient, despite being this kind of raging mass of turmoil on the inside when I'm frantically trying to think about what I'm going to say next. Then on Saturday my mum came to visit, which was really, really nice. So my mum came down, she brought my little brother Charlie, who's currently doing his A-levels. They drove all the way down from home, which is about 3 hours drive away, to come down and visit me. Neither of them have actually seen this house before, or Leamington really, because my dad came and dropped me off when I moved in. So I kind of showed them around the house, then we went out, wandered around Leamington, then went for some food at Bill's actually, where we've eaten before, and I did that chocolate bomb video. had steak and chips. It was really, really nice. It was just lovely to see them, because it's been a while. Well, it's been a month, but no, I've been here 8 weeks. It's been nearly that long. So it's been a while. Really nice to catch up with them. They weren't here that long, but it's a bit of a trek back, and they've got a lot of their own work to do. My mum's really busy, and Charlie, he wants to be a lawyer, so he's got plenty of background work to be doing. And actually, really like stupid but cool thing. So in third year at Newcastle, in our house, we had like a quite old, quite small CRT TV. It was really big and really heavy, but the screen itself wasn't that big in the living room. So we decided as a house, right, let's put some money in and let's buy a new TV for the living room. We can put the old one downstairs and we'll put this new one in there. So I did a bit of research around, kind of knowing a little bit more about technology, I suppose, in the house, and found a big TV, a 55-inch plasma, which I paid £100 for. Found a Gumtree seller, so we went, picked that up, brought it back. I decided to just take the hit on the TV, so we were trying to decide, you know, do we split up the cost or whatever and then deal with it at the other end. But I thought, well, you know, depreciation will be annoying and it's a second-hand TV anyway. I'll just take the hit and keep it as my property, but like leave it in the living room. So it was functionally just the living room TV, but when we moved out I took it home, and I kind of half jokingly asked my mum if she could bring it down, because we can then use it as our big living room TV wherever we go to live next year. We're actually going house hunting in a couple of weeks, so a few of us from the house, I think we're going to stay together. And lo and behold, my mum, being the gem that she is, she actually brought it down with her in the back of the car. So I'll show you in a minute, but there's this stonking, ridiculous plasma TV living in my bedroom now. So that's cool. Okay guys, I'm just going to show you the ridiculous scale of this TV, like as to the scale of my double bed, right? Look at that. It's really ridiculous. It's like having my own little lecture theatre, and it's really good for using like echo recordings, as well as watching Blue Planet as well, because that's back on, which is more important, obviously. But today, so Sunday, if I just look at my phone, the 19th of November, it was the Leamington Spa Christmas light switch on. So I did a bit of work this morning, kind of cleaned round generally, but just had a bit of a relaxed day. And yeah, so we went down in the afternoon. It got dark at about 4:10, so that's when I went down into Leamington. I met up with Emily and one of her friends who's already there, and there'll be some footage playing as I'm talking, but it was really, really nice. There were lots of like market stalls and rides and things like that, sort of like little fun fair things. And we went, well, I went in to meet them. They were already in the pub, kind of waiting for the light switch on, so we went in. We were told that the lights were due to be switched on at 5. We came out just before 5, I think it was like 4:56, and the lights were all turned on, so I'm not exactly sure when that happened. And clearly they must have picked quite an odd time to turn them on, because they weren't on at 4:30, but they were on at 5. Because they weren't on at 4:30, but they were on at 4:56, so I'm not sure exactly when they were turned on. Whatever, that was really cool. I've just come back tonight. I've done a bit more work, done some graphic design, some video editing, and just trying to prepare for tomorrow, really. We've got to crack on with CBL and get myself ready for week 3 of Block 2. So 3 more weeks and we have the formative for Block 2. We have our mock OSCEs, so that'll be the first time we've had an assessed OSCE, and then we're actually off for Christmas. So it seems to have absolutely flown by. But to be honest, that's partially why I'm so kind of glad that I've decided to keep the blog and do these videos, because I just forget. Like, even if I miss a day or two on the blog, stuff comes at you so fast, it's difficult to remember what you were feeling on a given day. I've also started recording some other videos in the Q&A series, so one of those has gone live. I think there'll be another one tomorrow, and then the other 2 will go up during the week at some point, but I hope you enjoy those. I'm working on some new UK CAT practice questions. They'll go up on the website, but I'll also release some sort of kind of compendium in the form of a free PDF ebook type thing. So I'm really looking forward to that. I'm working on a lot of things, and there's a super cool project that I'm also working on, but hoping to get it out before Christmas. But if not, it'll come out afterwards. But I'll talk about that another time too. Take care, guys, and I'll see you next week. Bye bye for now.